I know we're waiting for a timing deal, right? But we could have votes as soon as tonight.
Yeah, our colleague Ari Natter just caught up with Senator Ben Cardin, who said his expectation, and this is not written in stone, is they could start votes around 6 p.m. to this evening.
1 hour from now.
And that could be between 8 and 15 amendment votes. So this could be a middle-of-the-night passage vote if they get all 100 senators to agree to that unanimous consent time agreement to speed this up. If they didn't have everybody on board, the Senate moves so slowly that they wouldn't even meet the deadline. So this is a matter of getting literally all 100 people to agree on amendments, assurances about future spending plans, and then everybody signs off on the time for a vote.
What kind of amendments could we see, Laura?
A bunch of different things. You're really seeing some of the stuff that's in the bill. So things on permitting, that Mountain Valley pipeline. You have some Democrat on Democratic action here. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia wants to strip that language out that his colleague, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, wanted. Also seeing things related to some of the hardliners, the people that you expect occasionally will draw out some of these things. Rand Paul wants big cuts to spending, as well as other things related to military funding as well, because a lot of the defense hawks are concerned that even though there was an increase of about 3% in military spending, that when you compare it to inflation, it amounts to an actual cut.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we spoke today with Senator Lindsey Graham on Capitol Hill. He had great concerns about the level of defense spending in this package, and he was ready to do something about it. Listen to what he said.
I'm talking to the President Zelensky at 1 o'clock today. He's confused. I want him to know that this budget deal does not take off the table the ability to help Ukraine with their liberation efforts, that there will be more money coming through a supplemental. I want our own military to hear that there's a chance to repair some of the damage. And if I don't hear that, we'll be here to Tuesday, and every day I'll offer an amendment to not default.
Be here till Tuesday, I'm assuming, is not going to work with the leadership here. Do we assume Mitch McConnell had a conversation with the gentleman from South Carolina about this today?
I think all the leadership are talking about his demands, and he was actually joined by Susan Collins, who's the top Republican on the Appropriations Committee, saying she also wants assurances. Remember that this bill creates spending caps, and as soon as Washington creates spending caps, they start talking about how to get out of the spending caps. So they are talking about assurances that they will get cap-exempt spending for defense purposes. That's what the defense hawks are talking about. Now, Democrats have also said, well, if you're going to do that, there should be other non-defense cap-exempt funds. So they are having conversations not only about amendments, but promises that they may put in writing regarding cap-exempt supplemental spending bills and what they would apply to in the future.
So it sounds like potentially we could see side deals coming out of individuals making these amendments and having these votes. What happens in terms of any of these amendments actually getting added to the bill? Or is that just not going to happen?
There is almost no chance, because remember, if the Senate amends the bill, they add one of these amendments, it has to go back to the House for the vote. They got to call all the House members back, and then they're really in trouble of meeting that June 5th deadline. So basically, everyone's come out and said, we know these amendments aren't going to pass, but we're going to go through this process just so everyone can get their time in the sun. They can issue their press release saying that they fought for this issue that ultimately they didn't get.
This is fascinating, and it's partly why people either don't understand or hate Washington. We're looking at a live view here of Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia making the case for his amendment here on that pipeline we talked about that runs through Joe Manchin's state that was dropped into this bill at the last moment. But he knows that that amendment is going to fail. This is all messaging, right? We spoke with Senator Mike Braun of Indiana earlier today. He even referred to his amendment as a messaging opportunity because they realize they bust the whole deal if this gets passed.
Yeah, I mean, messaging can be important. That's a big part of politics. Yeah. But the fact is the leadership strategy is maybe you can get an amendment vote if it's going to fail. And actually part of the negotiations are what do we set the threshold at? Do you get an amendment vote where it's adopted with a simple majority or 60 votes? Senator Graham was pushing for an amendment to increase the defense spending level. That could get some numbers behind it.
Yes, right.
If they allow that, they may set it at a 60-vote threshold, again, because the purpose for allowing these amendments is to get people to have their opportunity to make their point, but it's got to fail so that they don't have to send this back to the House.
Okay, so it doesn't go back to the House likely. It passes potentially this evening or early hours of tomorrow morning. I'm sorry for both of you that potentially will have to be up and
You're staying up for that,
and
too.
covering for this. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Only if Joe stays up, I'm willing to also stay up. What happens, though, when it comes to the appropriation committees later in the year? Isn't this where the big fights are going to happen?
This is the big broad fight. There are 1,000 little or big fights. Again, supplemental cap-exempt spending bills for Ukraine, for disaster aid, potentially for border security. That's going to be a big fight. The tricks that appropriators can use to take credit for the savings of the COVID funding rescissions, that then if they include that in the appropriations bills, they can count that against their cap and actually spend more than the caps. There's going to be some very complicated stuff to, one, try to get around the caps, but two, try to get 12 appropriations bills done and avoid a shutdown. And again, this includes something that if they are relying on a stopgap measure past January 1st, it actually cuts everything by 1%. So nobody's happy. So the pressure is on to sort through all sorts of deals on funding the government and also the attempts to get around these caps that are in the debt limit bill.
So for those who are playing along on their home games here, we're waiting for a timing deal. As soon as we get that, we have a sense of how long voting might last. Then everybody gets on an airplane. President Biden then could sign this as soon as tomorrow.
Yes, he could. He's traveling this weekend. He could also, if they want to make a big show of it, wait until Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, have a splash. But just to give you a sense of kind of how much, all the lawmakers involved are thinking about the politics of this and the messaging of it, is Chuck Schumer came out of his office where they're kind of figuring out the last minute deal, and he just to do a photo op. He pumped his fist, kind of did a mission accomplished, just to get that photo in the light of day because they may not finish voting until 4 a.m. this morning. So everyone's thinking about how do we claim their piece of credit for this deal going forward. Biden will do the same on how he signs this bill.